in order for businesses to thrive, civil order must prevail. And therefore, when we go into a community like we did in several cities in our violence-free zone, where we actually recruited ex-offenders and as moral mentors, once they have been redeemed, they become the Josephs. We take them in, and they are able to identify the small number of predators who are creating problems for the rest and promote peace in the neighborhood. We went from 53 gang murders down to zero for 12 years. And when that happens, we have the 6 young men that started a pizza delivery business, because once their character changes, their characteristic has an advantage.
Welcome back to Prosper, everyone. I'm your host, Andreas Wittmer, with my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. We're coming to you from the Woodson Center, the Entrepreneurship Center at the Catholic University of America, the Bush School of Business, and this is Prosper, 40 minutes or less for the wisdom you need to flourish in business. Now, it's a real honor today to welcome Robert L. Woodson Sr. to Prosper. He is the founder of the Woodson Center, a nonprofit that helps low-income residents address problems in their own neighborhoods. He has been influential in tackling poverty alleviation and empowering disadvantaged communities for many years. He spent decades helping individuals and schools and communities transform from the inside out.
Movement, and hopefully we'll hear about that in just a minute. As a young civil rights activist, he developed and coordinated national and local community revitalization programs, starting from the premise that the best solutions come from within affected neighborhoods. During the 1970s, he directed the National Urban League's Administration of Justice Division, and he has a long list of prestigious awards, including the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Genius Fellowship Award, the Bradley Prize, and the Presidential Citizens Medal, which is our nation's second highest civilian honor. He's also the author of several books, including On the Road to Economic Freedom, The Triumph of Joseph, How Today's Community Healers Are Reviving Our Streets and Neighborhood, Lessons from the Least of These, The Woodson Principles. He had a #1 bestseller called Red, White, and Black, and then has a newly released A Pathway to American Renewal, Red, White, and Black, Volume 2. So we are just so overjoyed and honored to welcome Robert L. Woodson to Prosper.
Pleased to be here.
So I'm going to start you out the same way we start everybody out, Mr. Woodson, with a warm-up question, which is, what are you reading right now that you're really enjoying?
I'm rereading Fred Siegel's book, This Future Once Happened Here. He's deceased now, but he was a good friend, and I traveled to Brooklyn to sit in his living room to just absorb his wisdom. But I think he has one of the most comprehensive descriptions of where the government went wrong in serving poverty and what are the challenges that can solve the problem. And so that's the book that I'm rereading right now.
That sounds wonderful. Did you help contribute to that book in any way?
No, I traveled the same paths that he did and met the same people, and it was just interesting to see his observations. Dr. King said that the highest form of maturity is the ability to be self-critical, and that's a proposition that I have followed, and that's why I respect Fred and others like that. We're people who are willing to re-examine their own actions and make the kind of changes that are necessary.
You know, I told you in the prep call here that I've listened to you speak before. You have been I think you're a regular speaker here at CUA. And I wanted to say that I'm starstruck by you, but I'm not. I'm awestruck by you. You know, I grew up in Switzerland, and so I'm a very happy American by choice. But there's a lot of the history that I am a total outsider. And I'm awestruck because your story involves the civil rights movement. Actually, you were born, if I'm not mistaken, in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And you grew up there, and you had your formative years happen during the civil rights movement. Can you talk a little bit about that beginning of your life, and how did you grow up, and then how did you come into this?
Well, thank you. I'm the youngest of 5 children born in a low-income Black segregated neighborhood in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There were no professionals. They were all working class. But as I said, but also I had holes in my shoes during the Depression, but 2 loving parents in my home.
And can I ask you something? Can I
Yes,
ask you something? And you know what? I'm just going to always think I'm completely ignorant on this. And so I'm just going to ask you all the questions I have. Okay. When you say segregated neighborhood, what does that actually mean?
it means that the whole neighborhood, you were limited in where you could go to recreation centers. You were in a confined neighborhood. The stores were Black. Everybody there, the churches, everything. It was totally isolated.
I would
And
call that a ghetto.
I don't agree. A ghetto
Well,
has to do with
what's the
values,
difference?
not ghettos. To me, are areas of dysfunction.
Oh,
There's a difference between a neighborhood and a ghetto.
okay.
And as I said, 98% of the people in my neighborhood had a mother and a father raising children.
Hmm.
Elderly people could walk safely without fear of being assaulted by their grandchildren. I never heard of gunfire or children shot in their cribs the way we do
Hmm.
now. So a lot of the problems that we associate with ghetto life today
Okay.
did not exist uh, in my neighborhood
Yeah.
where we grew up. And so I think that's a very important distinction.
See, that's why I think it's helpful as an outsider to ask all the questions
No, it
because
is.
uh,
And my
it,
dad died when I was 9, leaving my mother with a 5th grade education and 5 children to raise. And so I understood why it's important to cleave to peers. So I had 5 or 6 very close people. And so their dads became my dad. And so I understand why kids join gangs. And so that has helped me a great deal in guiding my work. That it's the association that they're seeking. What we object to is the violent behavior of that association. But it's the same distinction we make between a ghetto and a neighborhood.
so you're 9 years old. You start to be exposed to the whole
Right.
community, really, right? And the community helped in a sense. The fathers of your friends helped bring you up from that perspective, from the male
Yes.
perspective. And then what? You went to
Yeah.
school,
My
and
friends, we stayed together, and I was blessed to choose people with good character as friends. In fact, one of them you may know, he was Gordon on Sesame Street, Matt
Oh my
Robinson.
goodness.
Remember
That's
with the
fun.
afro?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, his daughter is Holly Robinson, the actress. And first time I've ever and last time I've ever been to Hollywood about 10 years ago was to eulogize him when he died. So that's kind of the only one of us who really made it big. But they were a year older than me. Long story short, they were a year older. When they graduated and went on to school, I was unaffiliated. So I dropped out of high school at 17 and went into the Air Force. And where that was the best experience in my life. I learned to meet people I went there thinking that Black people were a majority in America because all I saw in my life. And so when I got off this plane and saw hundreds of people, white people with Southern accents and others, so it was a real cultural shock. And so, but I was fortunate enough to be trained and I went to the space program, doing air electronics, missile tracking systems. And so I was the only Black, I think, doing that kind of work in the space. I worked on the first Earth satellite attempt, but I was trained in Mississippi. So I saw racism in the raw in 1955 when I went to Mississippi. And then, but I finished high school in the military and got 12 credits at University of Miami when I couldn't walk on the campus because of
Oh my
segregation.
goodness. Oh my goodness.
So I have 12 credits from University of Miami and Rollins College when I could not walk on the campus because of my skin color. But the Air Force provided fully accredited courses on the base for us to attend.
And the base was integrated.
Oh yeah, the military was, the Air Force was.
What year are we talking about?
1955 to 58. And then I got out and took some college courses and went to a small black college. Thank God we didn't have affirmative action then, because I was not prepared to go to the University of Pennsylvania that I went for graduate, but I had to go to a small black college where I was nurtured by professors there, these 12 veterans, and we read our first book cover to cover as freshmen and age 21. And so they nurtured us and gave me the experience and the competence, self-confidence that I received a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work and did pretty well. And then went into when I was working as an undergraduate, I worked as a juvenile jail, and I was locked behind 3 doors with juveniles, 65 of them charged with everything from gang murder to truancy, with no programs. I had a burning bush experience when I didn't know what a burning bush was, but but
My
six
goodness.
six of them I would have adopted if I had the money to do so, because their character was good, but they were just in a circumstance. And then I got into the civil rights movement, and then after a year or two, I became disenchanted on the whole and broke ranks on the issue of forced busing for integration, and also the kind of bait and switch game that I saw, where middle class blacks use the demographics of low income blacks as the bait. And when the resources arrived, it only helped people like myself who had college degrees. And that's when the poverty programs came along. I knew from the first year that it was going to be a destructive impact on my community. And I pushed back against it without success. And so I organized demonstrations outside of a pharmaceutical company. When they desegregated, they hired 9 black PhD chemists who refused to join our movement. And so I realized I was in the wrong struggle. So I began to work on behalf of low-income people of all races.
That's a spicy take, but really fascinating. Can you say a little bit more about your approach in those early days? Because you've always taken a kind of a community-based solutions
Yes.
sort of take on things.
Yeah, I think James C. Scott calls it metis knowledge versus episteme knowledge. Episteme being academic. I've always believed that metis knowledge or common sense knowledge is that being untutored does not mean unwise. And so I have always been influenced by the common sense experiences of ordinary people. And so from the very beginning, I knew that wisdom was not confined to people with college degrees. And so I began to work on listen to and learn from grassroots Josephs. And so my entire life has been spent using whatever influence that I have to validate the experiences of untutored people, and documenting their successful approaches to reducing gang violence, to recruiting people through a process of redemption. And so I soon learned. So that has been my experience.
And obviously also their success in starting businesses and making ends meet.
When I started the Woodson Center, it wasn't the Woodson Center, it was the National Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, because I knew from the beginning that the principles in the market economy are important to apply in the social economy. My friend David Birch at MIT many years ago did a study of 5,000 entrepreneurs to see what their personal characteristics were. And he said that only 3% of the population are entrepreneurs, but they generate 70% of the jobs. And entrepreneurs tend to be C students, not A students.
Yeah, but to me, the entrepreneur is like a musician. Like I can make you a better musician, but I can't tell you either you're musical or you're not, right? But it goes straight through. I'm making the reference again, being from Switzerland, coming to America. I was very blessed in having a fairly successful business entrepreneurial career, and then eventually I got involved in Africa and South America to work on the economy, on advising businesses. And while I worked with like some of the best entrepreneurs in the broader sense, Silicon Valley, when I went to some of the poorest areas, I found some of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met.
Exactly.
And it's so this is why today what we teach is this enterprise solutions, especially to poverty, because that's the way out. And I'm somewhat influenced by John Paul II, who said, what the mistake we make is we look at poor people as a problem rather than looking at them as people with unfulfilled potential. And I think therein lies probably the inspiration and vision of what you had for your center.
It really was. When you mentioned St. Paul, he was talking about when he was a young priest at 23, he had a very severe illness. And this academy-trained physician prescribed something. An old nun who was a nurse for 40 years tripled the dosage, and that's what saved his life.
The one with the practical experience.
The one with the
practical experience
was she saw it and just tripled his dosage, and that's what saved his life. So there's an example of an entrepreneurial approach that people are able to act in the presence of their doubts and uncertainty, lose, and then come back and come again the third time. Is tenaciousness and perseverance. And so I believe this, and so that's what inspired me. And also in my book, The Triumphs of Joseph, Joseph from Genesis was an entrepreneur.
No kidding. Yeah, and a very successful one.
Yeah, but he also pushed it against oppression. He was not defined. I think it was one pastor said that 10% of who we are is defined by external circumstances. 90% is the attitude about the 10%.
Oh, that's a really good one. Let me pause us here just for a second in our conversation with Robert L. Woodson Sr. to invite you, if you are enjoying the podcast, to be sure to like us and leave a great review and subscribe. It really does help. And what also helps is organic marketing. So often, if Andreas and I are out on the town giving a talk somewhere, we'll invite somebody to the podcast and people around us will say, "Oh yeah, I listened to that." So if that's you, why not tell a friend who's also in business? We love that organic marketing in addition to the likes on Facebook and Instagram and that kind of thing. And to learn more about the show or more about the work of the Sioka Center, which connects innovation to personal vocation, visit us at siokacenter.com or click the link in our show notes. We'd love your feedback and support. And now back to the show.
Welcome back to Prosper. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Robert L. Woodson Sr. about what really works in lifting underprivileged communities up. And Mr. Woodson, what you just said before we left that your center was not called Woodson Center to begin with. Can you just double click on what prompted you to start this and what was your initial activity?
I was really fed up with what I was witnessing on both the left and the right when it came to poverty alleviation. They were missing it. That we spent $22 trillion on programs to aid the poor, where 70 cents of every dollar went to those who are providing service at the poor. So we created a commodity out of poor people and wonder why we failed. And so I said that this is a corrupt approach, And to more credible approach is to go among the people suffering the problems. Once they design a solution, then we must act as we're like a venture capitalist without capital.
Yeah. Sir, what I heard when you're saying that, I just have a flashback to meeting an aid worker, a U.S. aid worker in Africa, at one of these, the famous, there's like American watering hole where you go and hang out, and on Friday evening, and I went there, and I remember how I said that I was frustrated that I don't see a benefit of actual resolution or result or solutions. And he says, "Oh, you got this guy." But of course, he was cynical, but he says, "You got this whole thing the wrong side around," because I said that poverty doesn't seem to be decline, and he says, "No, you don't understand. When poverty becomes your business, more poverty is more business," and that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Absolutely. If my response, I had a friend who was getting a cabin built in Wisconsin. He said that his electrician was a drunk and his carpenter was a gambler, addicted to gambling. He said, no, he had one leg, not gambling. He said their value to me was their talent and their skill. But if I was a disabilities director, their value to me was their disability.
Yeah.
And so we have a whole industry built around the disabilities of people, and therefore they have no interest in improving them.
Glass half empty versus glass half full.
Exactly. So that's why when you come into a situation, the first thing when people see a low income community, they lower their expectations. But the sickest part of the body draws the strongest antibodies. And so I consider entrepreneurs like antibodies. The way you cure the human body is to strengthen its own immune system. The way you cure, I think it was David Birch who said that any group's position in the economy is not dependent on what government does for them, is their small business formation rates. That a healthy community generates 2.5 businesses per 1,000 people per year. And in some Black and brown communities, the generation is 3 per 100,000 per year. But it wasn't always like that. We document the fact that under segregation, when Blacks were compelled to, we had our own Wall Street. In the Bronzeville section of Chicago in 1919, under segregation, we had 731 Black-owned businesses. We had 100 million in real estate assets in just the Bronzeville section, and they were calling them small Wall Street. The Black Bottom in Detroit. I could take you city by city and name the entrepreneurial enclaves in these cities that were prospering. We had our own insurance company. We built our own hotels. We capitalized our own banks. We had our own railroad in Baltimore.
That's an amazing story.
In 1868, when 1,000 people were fired, the Black community established the Chesapeake, Maine Dry Dock and Railroad Company that ran successfully for 18 years from Baltimore to Maine and hired even white workers in the company. Our kids need to know this.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. So what happened?
What happened was this whole emphasis on in the civil rights movement, where we abandoned the principles of self-help and entrepreneurship. And instead, I don't have time to deconstruct all of that, but I would love to tell you is that government policies in the 60s with the poverty programs did more to destroy, and urban renewal did more to destroy centers of economic excellence than anything the White Citizens Council or Klan did.
Shouldn't civil rights and fighting poverty be two different things? Like this should be two different fights, right? And
right.
they would
But
put together.
one is preventing the other.
What would you say actually is working? Like, we work with a fair number of businesses who, like, there's a lot of concern in the business community now, like, how do we actually make things better? And it sounds like you would, think that some of the solutions that are being offered are actually not very helpful. But what can businesses do? And what's the Woodson Center approach that actually does work? Like, you have a whole book on this.
What really works is when, in order for businesses to thrive, civil order must prevail. And therefore, when we go into a community like we did in several cities in our violence-free zone, where we actually recruited ex-offenders and as moral mentors, once they have been redeemed, they become the Josephs. We take them in, and they are able to identify the small number of predators who are creating problems for the rest and promote peace in the neighborhood. We went from 53 gang murders down to zero for 12 years. And when that happens, we have the 6 young men that started a pizza delivery business, because once their character changes, their characteristic has an advantage. So they were able to deliver. So the key is changing civil order to improve, to make it safe, and then bring your entrepreneurs in, working in conjunction with these civil order Josephs. And then you can restore. I can take you to communities that have been totally restored, but we don't invest in them in these approaches.
Yeah, and we don't even tell the story.
No, we don't even tell the story.
See, that's the thing, is what helps. And this is my whole approach with this. And we do this here now with teaching is I love to lead with storytelling, because our hearts get attached to not facts or not principles, but people and stories. And so what we, in order to inspire entrepreneurs to actually take what it takes to start and start to use their agency, we need to show them others who have done it and inspire them. And so I like positive psychology. I like doing more like what you're saying, this idea that the virus, what antibodies go to where the wound is. It's sort of to see what works and then do more of it until it's healed, right? It's a positive psychology approach in a sense, and that's why I'm so surprised when you're like, why don't I know these kind of I've lived here for over 30 years, 35 years. I've never heard of some of the stories that you're talking about.
When you read our books, and I mean, I'm amazed because I can tell you 20 people who were born slaves who died millionaires. And some of them purchased a plantation on which they were slaves. One of them, Robert Smalls, took in the ill wife of the slave owner as an act of radical grace. See, our kids need to be told these stories. And when we get together at the Woodson Center, our gatherings, we don't talk about problems for which we don't have a solution. That's one of the guide rules. That if you bring up a problem, you must have a proposed solution. Otherwise, you sit down.
If you were one of the listeners, which probably is on an average 25 years old, let's say 25 to 30 years old, give me some advice of what you would do to be a part of the solution rather than the part of the problem, because you're calling this sort of the gripe problem, like that we focus on the complaint more than the agency of what we actually have power to do as an individual. I think that inspires a lot of people who are listening to this. And I wonder what we can do today. Maybe like one of the themes we have in our class is instead of running out of the city, to run into the city, because there's a lot of opportunity in downtown, and to create communities or so. What are some of your, like, what do you see that works?
Well, one of the Woodson principles is even you can injure with the helping hand as well. It's important not to come in with prescriptions that you're going to design and parachute in for me. Even the human body rejects a transplant, no matter how well intended a transplant is. You got to fool the body into believing that it's in its interest.
Man, that's wisdom right there.
And so neighborhoods are the same way. The qualities that makes a Joseph effective also makes him invisible, because they're not whining or complaining. They're too busy doing the work. You have to be like a Geiger counter and find them, because they're not looking for you. But you have to have the humility with all of your education and experience to sit and listen and learn to be on tap and not on top. I recruit people. Like I said, I'm a venture capitalist without capital. So I have to recruit. I do fundraising. So I find entrepreneurs and I take them by the hand. I said, "We first come and see what I see." Like the Pineywood School was a 115-year-old black boarding school in Pineywood, Mississippi, that has mandatory chapel, mandatory work. 100% of the kids from some of the most challenged neighborhoods all go on to post-secondary education, most of them to college. So it is important to demonstrate to the American public that no matter where you were raised, how you were raised, or the circumstances under which you were raised, that you have the ability to be agents of your own uplift. And therefore, public policy must shift to go into these communities and search out these entrepreneurs, social and then write about them. Jason Riley just came with us in Mississippi to the Pineywood School 2 days ago and wrote a fantastic column that details the process of transformation and redemption that goes on.
Say a little bit more, because you talked about Pineywood and mandatory chapel. And I know that one of the elements, one of the, I think, 3 main rules of the approach of the Woodson Center includes respect for the role of virtue-based or faith-based programs. Say a little bit more about that, if you would. Why is that so important?
Well, what we did was we went around for about 2 years, because after 10 years, because I wanted to gain more insight as to what changes people, and everybody told me it's going to change my whole life, and it did, because 90% of the people that we interviewed said faith has changed my life, but I'm afraid to talk about it because I may lose funding. And so I said, well, the Woodson Center is going to be very explicit in its support and advocacy for faith as central to any redemptive process. And that's why our base is private, but we're unapologetic and providing a space where people can come and profess their faith. Values are not taught necessarily, they're caught. And the way you spread that is we highlight people whose actions or organizations whose actions exemplifies biblical principles. I mean, we had a retreat with 50 of our grassroots leaders. If it was a revival. And I would say to you, in 44 years of running the center, we've had retreats, and we have 3,000 grassroots Josephs all over the country, black, white, red. Racial animus never came up in one time of any of our gatherings at any time.
But sir, let me ask you this. So I read Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Okay, and it makes me feel horrible. Okay, I don't want to be a racist. I hope I'm not. But can give me some advice, as I'm a 60-year-old white guy, right? I'm the classic person who kind of says, look, I don't want to make a mistake. You're creating an environment where this doesn't even come up. So give me some advice on that.
I said to a friend of mine, Bill Raspberry, who was a deceased journalist, his house was robbed and his wife lost her furs and her jewelry. I said, if a racist witnessed it and can testify and you can get your goods back, would you accept his testimony? He said, of course. So I don't care. I care what you do, how you treat me. Justice is what you do for me now, not trying to reconcile what you did to me in the past. The past is past. Joseph, and Joseph is a bird. Joseph, after all, his own family betrayed him.
Sold him into slavery.
The Egyptians enslaved him.
Yeah.
But he took actions that benefited both of them.
What is that? Why did you choose Joseph specifically? Is that the person out of the Bible that spoke to you as a symbol of this?
Absolutely, because Joseph never succumbed to bitterness. He didn't ask the question, what my family owes me for
He
what they
cried
did
with his
to
brothers,
me.
right, at the
Or
table.
the Egyptians enslaved me from the time I was 17 till I was 31. I didn't do anything. But if men like Joseph cannot be stuck in the past about reparations or whatnot, if Robert Smalls can purchase the plantation and take in the wife of the slave owner, if people who were directly injured by it can forgive and practice radical forgiveness, why the hell can't the rest of us? Why should we even talk about it? I'm telling you, when I'm together with my grassroots Joseph, we never ever talk about race. White people talk about race and hustling black people. Yeah. You have some whites who are race grievance merchants too. They raise a lot of money complaining about what the left is doing.
In my work in conflict areas, I worked a lot in post-conflict countries like Rwanda or Macedonia, Serbia, and so on. And there, the policy was that the way you fight this issue is to, like you're saying, is to not talk about it. Like this distinction needs to just go away. Like we just focus on something else and say, what can you do? You know, what can you create value here? That's the one thing, and I think there's a deep wisdom in that. It's just in the United States, this is such a foremost and prominent issue that is very powerful. It's a bit like the poverty issue. And if poverty is your business, then more poverty is more business. And maybe if racism is your business, talking more about it is more business. I don't know.
Yeah, but Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, no man suffered more than this man did, lost his children and his wife and all. And he said there were good guards and bad inmates. There was one commandant at the end who did everything he could to save Jews. And when the Allies took over the camps, they took him into the forest and hid him until they could negotiate his peaceful surrender. And this man was given responsibility for distributing goods to the other camps. By contrast, there were some Jews prisoners who became capos and more brutal to their own people than the Nazi guards. So there are different responses to oppression. And Viktor Frankl said that I didn't want to be like Ursula Weissman, who spends the rest of his life hunting down Germans. I don't spend one day talking about retribution for past deeds. And none of us should. We should be focused on how can we improve the quality of our life as it exists now.
Yeah, there's a business entrepreneur we really admire and actually hope to have on the show named Magat Wade, who always uses the expression "criticize by creating." And it sounds like that's really the business that you're in, is just build up the community, create the positive experiences and conditions that make people thrive, and then the other problems fade by contrast because there's too much flourishing happening around it.
We have 2 million Black millionaires in America. 2 million. You know, if you're going to suffer, that's how I want to suffer.
I want to go back to one other thing. So we talked about, if we think about the three major Woodson principles. So one is, in Catholic terms, we would talk about the term subsidiarity. That's one of your core principles, is the idea that people who are in low-income neighborhoods or situations have a right to and an obligation, and also the privilege of being able to be a big part of the solutions that are going to apply to them. As you said, nobody should come in and be on top. People have to come in and learn how things actually are and find solutions. And we also talked about the importance of faith-based or virtue-based programs, so that it's because it's faith that changes lives. And one thing we haven't said too much about, although we've hinted around it a little bit, is that long-term solutions are going to respect market principles. And I wonder if you would say a little bit about that, and also how the Woodson Center transmits that idea.
Well, first of all, we honor we encourage entrepreneurs explicitly. People, we have one young lady who was on welfare. She's enabled 1,800 to start small businesses from public housing residents. We have some people who explicitly go in and teach entrepreneurship as a value, but the principles of self-development, that we create the expectation that you must be agents of your own uplift. And so we constantly bring people together with people that the most powerful teacher is a witness. And so we bring successful entrepreneurs, people who had overcome great difficulty. My friend John Ponder in Las Vegas has a program that we help. It's called Hope for Prisoners, where about 6,000 people over the last 15 years, but only 6% recidivism rate. He has a skills center now built in the prison where they can learn to be plumbers and carpenters and electricians while they're in prison. And so a great deal. Someone said that a transformed heart needs busy hands and a full stomach.
Ain't that the truth?
That is wisdom. That's wisdom right
That's
there.
where entrepreneurship and human development come simultaneously. One depends upon the other.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to believe in yourself first. The other thing that we preach, this is important, is not to injure with the helping hand, is reciprocity. Don't just do things, give people things. But also, once you help them, give them an opportunity to give back to someone else. And we create that as an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time, I don't do charity. I do investments.
Yeah, you're singing our tune.
And when I invest you, I expect you to respond as if someone has invested in you. There's an expectation that you're going to pay back that investment in a transformed life. So it's important to have those as core values. So a person doesn't have to surrender their dignity just because they're in need.
Yeah.
But we don't let people hustle us either.
Profound truths and wisdom. Mr. Woodson, thank you for your time. This was an investment. Lots of people are hearing you through this. And let every listener be reminded that this is not a gift and not charity, but it is an investment, and it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. I think on this podcast I learned the most so far. I am in awe, and I'm thankful that you took the time to be with us.
Well, thank you. We have a lot of information on unrevealed facts from the past that we would be delighted to share it with your listeners.
Yes, we're going to put a bunch of links from the Woodson Center and from your books in our show notes. And I especially want to call attention to, we didn't get to this, but you all have a really delightful series of cartoon videos telling the stories of some great Black entrepreneurs, and they're just charming and doing what you're saying, which is telling the good stories, because we sometimes don't hear them.
We had 4 million downloads of those.
So we'll put that in the show notes, huh?
Yeah. And is there any, other than the Woodson Center site itself, is there anything in particular that you would like our listeners to highlight? Is there a site you want them to go to?
No, I just think go to our Woodson Center.org, and we have a very generous site. But I'd love for you to look at our cartoon series, our animation series. We're really happy with the way that turned out, and we're producing more.
Folks, this is something that we could do 3 podcasts on. But Mr. Woodson, I thank you for being here and for taking the time to share your wisdom with us, to invest your wisdom in us. And thank you, listeners, for spending a quick 40 minutes. Maybe this one was 50 minutes with us. We enjoy having you. Please give us feedback. Take care. And until next time, in every way, we hope you prosper.